Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we're honored to have with us our good friend, Joel Primus. When you talk about being an author, a creative, an entrepreneur, there's a lot to unpack. But Joel, how are you doing, buddy?
I am great. I'm glad to be back and jealous of your great hair.
Well, we've had you on our ChangeMakers podcast. We've had you on the TV and radio shows. So, we're not going to dive in too deep on the backstory because everyone can go and check those out online at citycurrent.com and, dive into your backstory. But you've got a lot of really cool projects, and you talk about a book and then an upcoming book. You've got the relaunch of, all these different amazing projects. You've got shows that you're working on as well. So when you look at everything on your plate, when someone says, Joel, what do you do? How do you even start to describe what you do?
Yeah, that's a very good question. My dad was doing some construction at my brother's house a month or so ago, and my brother sort of coyly asks, so what does Joel do actually? There's all these different things. I have tried to get intentional around coming into the frame of I am a creator, because it's really hard, I think, to know what you are in this world of being an entrepreneur, or even if, let's say you work another job and you're maybe you do sales at that job, but that's not what you feel in your heart. And I have found that the more I just hone in on what it is that I think I am, and why I think I'm here on planet Earth, the better I am at doing that thing, the more I'm aligned with that purpose, the more clear that purpose becomes for me. And so I try and think of myself as a creator, and I don't want to ramble on too much about it, but the reason that it matters is because, for instance, as an entrepreneur and a CEO, there's a lot of hats I end up wearing in a company. And the bad habit that I have is that I end up trying to micromanage, and I end up trying to touch everybody's job, get into the weeds of all of those different things that I am not inherently very good at. And nobody wins. They don't win. They hate it. I'm over their shoulder. I don't win. I'm not very good at that. I'm stretching myself thin. So the more I lean into what I think it is that I'm here to do and can do well, the clearer I get, the more focused I get, the better output that comes from it. So that clarity has been something I've been really trying to latch onto this year. And just to wrap that idea, it's harder to do than you think, to just really distill it down to like one thing.
When you look at your backstory, fitness, a big part of that, launching a brand, Naked, and clothing, underwear, and that's, you're taking that really to the top of its game. We'll talk about Naked Revival, but, fitness continues to be a big part of your story. Traveling with your family, big part of your story. Hunting and foraging now too, with TV shows. But talk a little bit about kind of that business side, some of the business ventures, because obviously for those who can see behind you on the screen, you've got your book, and that is Getting Naked, the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship and Startups. And so give us a little bit of kind of the CEO, the chief visionary background on the business side.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. It's, you and I were chatting a little bit, and before we went on the show here, and it's just, life's short, and it's so much fun to pursue the things that fill you up, right? That give you that sense of life, that when you do the thing, you don't feel like you're working. It's cliche. I get it, right? But, what else is there to do? You can binge Netflix, or you can follow your creative passions. And so I had this company, just to rehash, called Naked Underwear. And it had this sort of surreal story because, Jeremy, are you familiar with the meme stock craze?
Yes.
Okay. So, and for those in the audience that, that was GameStop, right? And it was this Wall Street bets versus Wall Street saga that blew up the world. And Naked, my company, ended up being one of those companies, and it went from $5 million to $500 million in value. Absolute insanity. Like, I was getting phone calls from the New York Times. And so I'd written a book called Naked around that time, and then this whole thing happened, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this story's not done. And so I started to get that feeling, that entrepreneurial feeling, where you're like, oh, there's an idea coming. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to jump on this thing? And the answer was yes. And so I decided I wanted to start a company called Naked Revival, which was sort of 2.0, the unfinished business that I had with Naked the first time around, and just continuing that story. And I think there's a few things in here that are important. The lessons of, I keep this folder in my Apple Notes, and it's called Future Ideas. And I write down things that I want to do, but I also keep in there maybe things that I've already done. And it's this kind of live document that's not something I'm ever going to archive. And the spirit of is that it's okay for things in business and creativity to happen on a continuum. That, in other words, there's not necessarily a beginning point and an end point. You can reconnect with art, you can reconnect with business, both of your own volition or as it unfolds before you. You know, the yellow brick road, as I've heard said, only unfolds 2 bricks in front of you at a time, you know, before you get to Oz. And so as you're traveling that, it's really important to be aware of what's happening and where you want to jump into that, right? You know, who's the author? She writes Big Magic. Do you remember the author who writes Big Magic? Really popular. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I apologize. I can't. It's not. It doesn't matter. So the author who wrote Big Magic, she has this theory that she says ideas, they float around and they almost have a life of their own, and they land on you and they ask you, do you want to pursue me? Right? Do you want this? And sometimes they'll nudge you and they'll nudge you. And if you choose to say yes, then they're yours. And if you say no, that idea will leave and go find some other entrepreneur artist to take it. And so I take that very seriously. And I try through meditation and journaling to be very aware of what's coming from inside of me, but what's also coming from outside of me and in my environment in terms of what I'm going to chase, and what are the signs, and how do I feel when that sign hits me. And that leads me to do more things than I'd like to get back to your question, Jeremy. You know, that leads me to have written a book about Naked, and now we're releasing that book, Getting Naked, with a new forward and an afterword that tie it into the new company. And that leads to making this film about travel, and that leads to, you know, my cousin asked me to go hunting with him, and I'd never hunted before, and then this turned into this wild rewilding experience that we wanted to turn into a show to teach people how to do it. And so I just follow that, and I have two things. I try to have a lot of process that helps make these things effective, and I try and trust that by focusing on the end result of what I want, I'll be able to fill in the pieces as I get there. So I kind of answered your question, and I kind of went all over the place there.
Well, but I mean, look at all the things, you're all over the place in terms of all these projects,
Yeah.
but there's a common thread around, I think, genuine curiosity and continual growth and development, and also sharing that with others. And I think whether it's the book, the shows, the businesses, all of those are around sharing your purpose and passions with others, but also too learning and developing and growing along the way. And so I think there is a common through line with all of these projects. When you look at, you know, especially with Naked Revival, when you look at the lessons you learn, you know, in the first phase, and now with this 2.0, what's something that you say, okay, now, you know, I'm a little bit more mature and refined, and I want to go, you know, down this path. What's something that you've either is a calculated change or an adjustment, or something that's a growth, you know, with this 2.0 version?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy. And there's many answers to that question. Some are more technical in terms of what are the aspects of growing a brand and a business that I'm applying to 2.0 that anybody can apply to 2.0, right? Because like, what's, you're only a fool if you, I should say, sort of in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, the idea of being curious means that we start out with questions, and we start out by being a bit of a fool. We're foolish because we don't know. And by agreeing to the call to adventure, to the call to fill the curiosity void, we transform from a fool into someone who is mature and has knowledge, right? So every time we start something new, we're going to have that foolishness. And so we can't beat ourselves up about that, but we also have to apply those lessons that we've learned, right? And some of the big things for that is specifically being true to the brand. So when we launched Naked the first time, we had Nordstrom's. Everybody here knows Nordstrom's, right? And we had some of these department stores. Nordstrom's was a great partner, but they also had very strong viewpoints of what we should do. And I raised millions of dollars. And many of those investors had strong viewpoints of what we should do. And I fell into the trap of listening to all these viewpoints and not just listening to them, excuse me, because that's important, but starting to apply all of these things. And what ended up happening was the brand lost its clarity. It lost its core. It started to be sort of stretched across all these different ideas. And the customers, they're so intelligent. They noticed, hey, this isn't what it was 3 years ago. And it happens in these little increments, and it sneaks up on you one little decision at a time. And all of a sudden you're a mile away from where you started. And keeping core to where you started is so integral to a brand's success over the long term. So that's one little technical nit, is keeping true to what your brand is, while distilling and synthesizing great advice from others and opinions of others. But the biggest part to me in my heart is that the first time I started Naked, I was in this rush to be the successful entrepreneur that had the exit. Again, this is cliche. I'm a cliche kind of guy. It's easier. It's easier to go through life that way. So I was just in this rush, and there was sort of this anxiety in my breath, in my heart, in my whole body, that was like, have to get this to success. And this time around, it's like, nah, I'm just going to enjoy it, because as I think we talked about the last time, I mean, I put myself in a hospital 3 times from overwork. And just stress is such a killer. And I had 2 girls at the time, and my eldest daughter. I mean, I was hardly there. Children, what it's like to try and toggle these things. I was so focused. I was hardly there for her. Now I have 3 kids, and I was like, no, it all has to live together. As balanced as it can be, it has to live together, and I have to enjoy it. Otherwise, what on earth am I doing it for?
You've learned a lot with the shows because, to your point, you're putting yourself out there in a whole new world, hunting, foraging, learning the wilderness. But really cool, once again, that through line of being able to share it with others through the show. Share a little of that experience in terms of how that's really helped reframe, your perspective and how you view the world and how you go about with that curiosity.
Yeah. There's no secret that we live in a very, very siloed world today. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of tribalism. There's a lot of my side versus your side. And that's in our nature. It's in our nature to feel the security of the tribe, of the group, of the friend group, of the chat group, of the shared values. I don't want to sound like I'm a Canadian, but the romantic of idea of the United States of America, that we can be different, but we can be united. And the reason I share that is because that is how I try and approach the books that I write. Getting Naked, my new one, Good Boy, Bad Boy, my hunting show, Finding Nowhere. Hunting's very controversial, right? Very, very controversial. Not even if you're a vegan and believe it's wrong to hunt animals, or, on the flip side, you've been hunting animals for 3 generations and that's how you eat. So I always try and approach these things as a way of saying, how can I find the common ground, both for myself, so I can understand both sides of this equation, both sides of this belief system, and frame it in a way that helps kind of bridge that divide and make people also curious at the same time to explore these things. It's and ask the same questions I ask. Oh, well, what about this? And that's why I do what I do. And I'm just at the beginning part of that chapter of my life in putting these projects out there. Raising Global Citizens, the film was, what can we learn if we just go out to a dangerous country with our kids? We went to Lebanon, we went to Beirut. Every single travel advisory in the country said, do not take your children to this country, right? We had an absolutely wonderful experience with the warmest, friendliest people on the planet. And it hits home right now. I mean, we were in a Hamas controlled area called Uzville, and we had Hamas escorts taking us through this historic part of Beirut. And again, they were incredible to us. And then it creates this humanity that you don't just take what you see on the news as this is what those people are like. And again, for hunters, if I've spent time with them, 3 generational hunters, I don't just take them as, gun loving criminals. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to open that up to people through my own questions and curiosity and ignorance.
How, when you look at engaging your family
Yeah.
and raising global citizens and going into these other countries, but then coming back and, like you said, it reframes what does humanity look like and what, their personal experiences then in these countries. What does it mean through their eyes? Like, what conversations are you all having now? Like, how have you seen that change, especially for your wife and children, to be engaged in this process of growth, but to go through those experiences and then come back and kind of talk about them and share and,
Yeah.
internalize them?
I'd love to give you an awesome answer. They could care less. They could totally care less. I that's the reality of parenting, right? Is like kids will be kids, and our belief, and we say it at the end of the film, is that it's a felt experience that will show up later in life for them. It is not an academic or an intellectual experience that they are somehow now citizens of the world. But the irony, the ironic part is kids are colorblind to begin with. I know that term is a little bit, again, controversial these days, but I just mean they're not going there and seeing. They didn't start off needing to reframe their perspective because of how they had been raised into a certain culture, into a certain ideology, into a certain viewpoint. They didn't have that. They were a blank slate, and therefore everybody was fun-loving humans, right? So we just mostly did the trip for ourselves.
We'll talk about, though, how everyone can be a part of this journey with you, because Naked Revival, the shows, the books, obviously the new book, how can we be a part of this journey with you?
So let me frame that back to the family really quick. I was tongue in cheek in my answer, but it is really cool to, again, if you're an entrepreneur with a family, it is very cool to engage them into your world, so that you're not just daddy who works and then maybe dad who plays. So one of the things that I do is when I'm editing an episode, they get to sit beside me and I pause the shot. I said, what do you like about this? What do you not like about this? What do you think I should do? And then they get very upset with me if I don't use their ideas. So it backfires 100% of the time. When I have underwear and sleepwear and loungewear come in, I have them measure it for me. So measure it, make sure the sizing is what we set out to do. They've come to the factories with me in Vietnam and Taiwan and elsewhere. And so engaging them into your world as an entrepreneur and as a creative creates this bond and this understanding of, oh, this is what daddy does and we're kind of a part of it, or this is what mommy does and we do it too. And you do see that sense of, I don't want to use, pride might not be the right word, but you do see that sense where they feel connected to your vision in a way that makes them feel cool And so I'm trying to do that more. I never did that for like 10 years. I never did that, and I regret it. The other part of your question was just, where are these things? I apologize. Right now, these shows that we have coming out, we have a show called Revive, which is an entrepreneur show that's coming out in April, and that show tracks Naked Revival, and I take the viewer through what it's like to start a business, how hard it is to start a business, what it's like to raise money, what is it that an investor wants to see in a pitch in your business, all of those different things, keeping a team together in a digitally nomadic environment. So you can go to nakedrevival.com, although there's not much information on Revive there yet. Findingnowhereshow.com has Finding Nowhere, and there's some blogs about what we've done. My Instagram at Joel Primus has all of them, and Raising Global Citizens film.com or raisingglobal.citizens.com has the film, and that shows on the Go Traveler network. And my gosh, yeah, that's all there. So
that's the fun of it, though, is you always have something good to talk about. So that's why we love having you come on the show. So Joel Primus, thank you for all you do, buddy. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the cityCURRENT Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.